Hello, everyone, and welcome to Day 8 of CBC Live at TIFF. We are in the home stretch of this incredible festival. Joining me is CBC News' Eli Glasner, arts reporter and film critic who's had a busy festival. We have an incredible show today. Ingrid Venegar and Aaron Poole from the Animal Project are here. So are the filmmakers and the cast behind the documentary Our Man in Tehran. That's very cool that we have them here. Plus, we have the fabulous author of the Book of Negroes, Mr. Lawrence Hill. So join us on Twitter at CBC Live, hashtag CBC TIFF, to join the conversation, which begins with last night's big Canadian red carpet premiere for the film The Art of the Steal. And Eli was there, of course.
I was there. This is a Canadian film. It's a heist film with kind of, you could say, a Canadian spin or more of a blue-collar spin. I mean, when I was talking to the director, Jonathan Sobel, he was saying how, you know, these heist films now, you think of Ocean's 11, these criminals seem to be so well off and so sophisticated, they don't even need to be robbing the bank. They could just buy the thing. And so he wanted to bring the heist movie back to its roots. And, you know, this is a movie...
are a little busted, for
exactly.
sure.
And they're more often going to be in, you know, Windsor and Buffalo than they are going to be New York City and, you know, Cannes. So it's a different kind of movie. Great to see the guys on the red carpet.
It's set in Niagara Falls,
where
the director and writer's from.
So you've got Kurt Russell, the man, the icon, returning to the big screen to play Crunch Calhoun. So he's kind of a ne'er-do-well, now racing monster trucks, and gets a new crew together to, of course, one last big, you know, big hit. There they were on the red carpet. Jay Baruchel and Kurt Russell. So here's a great story. Jay is like the ultimate film fan. He loves movies and he loves actors. And he had, you know, let's say a bit of a crush maybe on Kurt Russell. They got some major bonding. And Kurt's been telling everybody that would listen that he didn't know this guy, Jay Who, before. And he's now actually embarrassed because he was so taken with Jay, who's not just an interesting actor, not just one of those character actors, but a writer and a producer and a real talent in Hollywood, that now he's just happy to know Jay and to see what's happening with Jay's career. And when they got together on the carpet, a big hug. Like, you could tell, this isn't acting. This isn't the Hollywood, you know, kiss. Like, these guys have made a connection.
And let's remind everyone, Jay Baruchel was in the biggest comedy of the summer, This Is the End. It's hilarious. And then he always brings it back to Canada. And this is from a relatively young director, Jonathan Sobel, right?
He's got a couple films under his belt. Kind of known for a light kind of comedic touch. But again, I mean, Kurt Russell, Terrence Stamp, the amazing Terrence Stamp is in this, Jason Jones, a very big cast. And you know, look, you want to talk about heist movies, we can go an hour. I mean, this is sacred ground for me, but
Is it really? I didn't know that.
Of course, and this is like one of those guilty pleasures. I mean, the thing that's amazing about heist movies is they can be so predictable, right? You've got the crew, they have to have funny names, we need an idea guy, we need a wheelman, we need a scratcher. It has all that. So you kind of reinvent the rules as you go, and then you add a little twist. And so that's what the twist is with this, is that they're kind of keeping them honest. Things never really go so well. They're not the most glamorous, you know, professionals. They're not even really professionals, to be honest, but it's a great tone, very funny, and some great chemistry between Jay and Kurt on set.
Totally, and you were on the red carpet last night. You talked to Jay and Kurt about what it was like to work together, and we have that clip right now. Check it out.
How do you keep your composure working with that guy?
Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you don't. I got a little fly-on-the-wall perspective into some of my favorite movies, and I also, you know, it's systemic from the top down. When the lead of the movie is an icon like him, and he works as hard as he does, and it's so pleasant on set, no one has an excuse to be in a bad movie.
And now The Animal Project is a quirky comedy that premiered at TIFF last night. It's about a theater troupe that tries something a little out of the ordinary to reignite their creative spark. We have the filmmaker Ingrid Venegar here and star Aaron Poole. Thanks for joining us, guys. So first of all, what is this quirky animal project that the film centers around? Explain what it is to our audience.
Go for it.
All right, well, basically I challenge my students to dress up as furry animals and to go out into public and cause mayhem.
And there was a lot of improv in this, right?
There's a little bit of improv. I mean, I think if you're in an animal suit, it's natural to go out and cause a bit of a ruckus. So we sort of had our actors interact with Toronto people on the streets, and Toronto was the most pleasing place and city to shoot in, honest to goodness.
Give me a sense of, I mean, what happened? I mean, what happens? What kind of things you didn't plan actually develop in front of your camera?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting that Emmanuel was the owl, and he was giving away free hugs, and of course a lot of people hugged it, but sometimes people didn't. It was
Yeah.
boring, people didn't want to be hugged by an owl, and he started crying in the owl head. Because of course they can see out of a suit, but no one can see in, so I think sometimes people think they're hugging large, furry, stuffed animals,
Yeah.
but in fact there's a live human being inside
you
those
know, it's
suits.
easy. You see those mascots at the parks, and you kind of forget that there's some poor schmuck stuck inside, right? And you kids go up and kick them and then run away.
This guy.
This poor
Those
schmuck.
animals are people too.
Yeah. But you know what I wonder, as an actor, is it freeing? I mean, you know, you
Yeah.
have that mask, right? And so you kind of have a license. You don't have that. You have the eye contact, but they can't see you. So I imagine that you can kind of push things a
Was
little.
this therapeutic?
Yeah, it was therapeutic. It removes a little bit of accountability, which I think is what holds people back from doing things, you know, internet trolls and whatnot. So these are like walking internet trolls.
Right, right. Now, I'm interested to hear kind of how your TIFF has been, because we've been seeing this amazing kind of Canadian, invasion, all these big name directors working with big name stars. You're a specialist at doing a lot with very little. So you're kind of working at a different level, but has it trickled down? Has all of that, Canadian love actually got to your world?
We had our world premiere last night,
Yeah.
and it was completely sold out. And
Really?
the applause and the laughter was extraordinary. And not only were people laughing and responding, because it is a kind of quirky, whimsical, playful film, but they broke out into spontaneous applause at about
Right.
30 minutes into the movie.
Oh, my
which,
goodness.
I mean, normally people applaud at the end, but to have
Yeah.
that kind of interaction with the audience, we have our second screening today at 5 o'clock at Scotiabank. And so I'm really excited because last night was opening night. Today's our second performance. But the film came to life in a way I could not imagine at the greatest film festival in the world.
And how do you think people liked seeing Toronto, and why is it important for you to have Toronto be Toronto in your movie?
I mean, I have my haunts in the film, the Monarch Tavern, the Cameron House, our Toronto beaches, all of Toronto streets, the Yorkville, and I think it looks amazing. So it's a naturalistic film. It's a film that I think is really great for everybody because it features a father-son story, and it features a lot of interactions that are really about life, love, art, and large furry animals. So if you like animals, you're gonna like this movie.
What is your favorite moment of the film?
There's a moment that I have with my son that's near the end. It has a real authentic tenderness to it. I think oftentimes when we see father-son relationships on movies, there's something a little
Yeah.
boiled
Cloying,
down, a little
saccharine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is truly authentic. My son, played by Jacob Switzer, who is Ingrid's boy in real life, has absolutely no sort of television shine to him at all. He's a real
Yeah.
guy being completely vulnerable, and it's my favorite moment.
But Ingrid, I mean, you've worked with your family before. We all get, embarrassed, nervous when a camera turns on. How do you get people to let go of that? How do you get these real performances where I imagine at the same time they've been around cameras so much, they're very aware of what's happening?
I mean, this film is definitely different from all my others. It's
Yeah.
my fourth feature as a writer, director, producer. And what I did first was I met with 100 Toronto actors without having any concept for a film, no narrative, no story. And then when I chose the 8 core,
Yeah.
I cast them first and then I wrote the script for them. So all the actors you see in the film committed to doing it without knowing anything about the roles they were going to be playing. So I think it was quite interesting when I said, here's your part and you're going to have a mascot
Yeah.
head on for half the movie.
Well,
Amazing.
you can see that movie today. If you want to go to tiff.net, you can check out the times again. You can go to the Lightbox, try to get a ticket. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations on that world premiere. That's great to hear. Hope to see you at the Canadian Screen Awards. All right, today's CIBC Star Moment. We're turning the spotlight on Canadian comedy legend Katherine O'Hara and her new project, The Right Kind of Wrong. Here she is talking about the film.
You know, I'm not the loving mother. You decide on the right man. You know, don't make this mistake like I made. You know, it's just,
Hey, burst here. Come on, listen to me for a second.
It's like a fairy tale.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
What the hell is she thinking?
I remember so fondly when I lived in Toronto when the festival started, and all those first years of sneaking into movies, sneaking into the parties. but seeing these amazing movies in the daytime that were not going to be released.
What makes you think that this, and this, isn't what you really want?
Roses. She hates roses. Hates flowers, period.
When I'm on a set and I figure out,
Okay, so when does this come out? Yeah, that could be close to September. What about, have you talked to the Toronto Film Festival about getting the movie in there? I'm always begging producers to go after Toronto Film Festival. I love coming here.
And now we're back with the author of The Book of Negroes. It's a 2009 Canada Reads winning novel, and it's about to be made into a CBC miniseries. Please welcome Lawrence Hill. Lawrence, thank you for coming.
Great to be here, Jamie.
So this epic novel, even though it's a miniseries, not just a 1 hour and a half, 2 hour movie, still, what does it take to bring it to movie format?
Well, I co-wrote the screenplay with Clement Virgo. It was really great to work with him. That was a project that lasted perhaps 2 or 3 years, and they're just in the process of bringing it to production. I think they'll be shooting in South Africa in the next few months, and then Nova Scotia right after.
What was it like? You guys worked on adapting the book to screenplay, right?
Yeah, it was really exciting.
What's the hardest thing about doing that?
I think you have to reimagine the novel to understand how it's going to work on the screen. I don't think that the way to judge a film or a miniseries is how closely does it follow the book. I think the litmus test has to be how good is it on the screen. And so we had to decide not just what stays in and what goes out, but how to retell the story in a way that would be effective in a miniseries.
Did Clement have some hard lessons for you in terms of letting go of, because, yeah, I mean, film or television is kind of an unforgiving medium, right? A minute a page, and all of those beautiful words.
A minute a page. It was really great. We come to some big scene in the novel, and Clement would look at me and say, "Larry, you've got 3 minutes. So you have 3 minutes to tell the scene. That's 3 pages. So 3, screenplay pages." So yeah, he was tough. It was great. I learned a lot. Nice
So is it a process that you enjoy, that you would do again?
I loved it. If it was a good project that I were invited to, I'd love to write another screenplay. It was a lot of fun. And also, to be paid to learn a new skill, that's a great thing.
The Book of Negroes elsewhere, outside of Canada, is called Someone Knows My Name. Why?
Well, in most countries it's known as the Book of Negroes, but in 3 countries it's known as Someone Knows My Name. In the States, the U.S., the States, Australia, and New Zealand, obviously publishers in those countries were uncomfortable with the word Negroes in the title, so the title had to change.
What impact did winning Canada Reads in 2009 have on the success of the book?
It was huge. The book had already done well, but it just had a huge impact on sales, and it also had an impact on introducing international publishers to the book. And it's very hard for Canadian writers to sell their works overseas. And so, sadly, many of us need to win a prize or two before publishers in other countries will start paying attention. So I'd say the biggest impact of all was that it made international publishers that much more interested in picking up the book.
I didn't realize international publishers had their eyes on Canada Reads in that way. That's incredible. We want some casting gossip, right?
Well, I did want to know, I mean, people love this book so much. Can you share? You're about to go into production in South Africa, so I imagine you must have an idea of who's going to be stepping in front of the lens. Care to?
Some of them are really fabulous, fabulously talented actors, but I'm going to have to turn you back to Damon De Oliveira, the producer, for that. They made me swear to secrecy before I come around this set.
Then I'm gonna honor that. But I do want to ask you. I mean, right now, what we're seeing at TIFF and just on the big screen, it seems like this year, all of a sudden, America is kind of rediscovering films about race. And we had Fruitvale Station, we had The Butler, we had the amazing, audacious, beautiful, and brutal 12 Years a Slave. And so suddenly it's like, you'd think we'd know these stories by now, but once again, we're re-examining them. Do you have any theories why it seems to be a bit of a trend this year?
Yes. Well, it is a trend this year, but I don't think that it's an unusual trend. I think that every generation, every period of time, people need to re-examine the big questions of their past. And our children and grandchildren will probably also be asking questions, what happened in the time of slavery and why? So we're never going to really let go. We're just going to continue to understand in our own way, in our own time.
So a couple generations ago, we had Roots, and that kicked off a wave. And
well, some of the most powerful artistic expressions in literature over the last 100 years have had to do with the black experience. So obviously not uniquely, but that's going to continue, I think.
Right.
Lawrence, you are the 2013 CBC Radio 1 Massey Lecture Series lecturer. The series of talks is called Blood, the Stuff of Life. Tell us how that title was chosen and anything else you can about what to expect.
Blood is a book-long meditation about the ways that we see the blood in our veins and how our understanding of blood that flows in our bodies affects our sense of identity and belonging individually and collectively. And I've had a lifelong obsession with blood. Ever since I spilled a bunch as a kid in a few accidents, I've been interested in my own blood. There's so many ways to talk about blood, whether it's Lance Armstrong and Ben Johnson affecting the composition of their blood to win the Tour de France or the Olympics, or whether it's embryonic stem cell research, or whether it's the politics of blood donation.
It's one of those connecting threads.
Yes, I think that we're more fascinated by blood than we even know. It's certainly the most sacred fluid in the body, the sacred substance in the body. We're all kind of mesmerized by our own blood. So it's a book about blood and identity. It just came out, and the Massey Lectures will be given across Canada in this back half of October.
Great. That sounds extremely interesting.
Cannot wait to hear it.
Thanks so much for joining us. We've got
you,
more information
Jamie.
about the Massey Lecture
Thank you.
Series at cbc.ca/live. All right, moving on. Everyone saw the Oscar-winning picture Argo, right? Well, next we're taking a look at the documentary film Our Man in Tehran, which premieres tonight at TIFF and digs deeper into Canada's role into the Iran hostage crisis, and also shines the light on Canada's former ambassador to Iran, Ken Taylor. Have a look at a clip, and then we're bringing them on.
Had our hands tied, we were blindfolded. We very quickly became pawns in this game. Whoever controlled us controlled the government.
Seizing an embassy and taking the staff hostage was an act of war.
It marked the end of conventional diplomacy. Now that they're safe, how do we get them home?
And I had this notion.
The CIA proposed the movie scenario.
Argo.
They loved it.
It's almost cowboyism. Gunslinger. That could have backfired into the most terrible tragedy.
A few miles away, our colleagues are basically being abused.
And I looked up at him and says, okay, I'm CIA, so what? May well be the worst pain I've ever had in my life.
I think Carter thought about every conceivable possibility, and that included military.
Everyone, please welcome Ken Taylor, Bill Doherty, and the film's directors Drew Taylor and Larry Weinstein. Guys, thank you so much. It's very cool for you to be joining us today. We enjoyed Our Man in Tehran. We saw it. What impact did Argo have on your decision to make this documentary film now?
Well, I think that Argo, the story was in development before Argo was actually released. So we knew that this was something that we wanted to approach. And then as Argo came, it just kind of created a bit of a sense of urgency to get this story out, try to get it in this next year, and have a bit of a bookend.
But be honest, when you first saw the trailer to Argo, what was your reaction?
When we first saw the trailer, Argo,
was it like, oh no?
No, it wasn't oh no, because
or maybe you were happy because you're like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it brought a lot of attention to the subject.
I think we would have been very depressed if Argo had told the Canadian story really well.
Right, exactly. So you're like, no, there's a lot. Well, that's one of the fantastic things about this documentary is that it really does a great job of setting up the geopolitics. I mean, something that, Ken does a great job of explaining also. All those other elements that you can't really get into in your typical Hollywood 2-hour film, especially when you're spending time cracking jokes with Alan Arkin and John Goodman. So it's a nice, we get the much, much bigger picture, starting I think as early as, 1972. So interesting the way you kind of set that tale in motion.
And what message did you want to get out that we did not get from Argo?
I think the Canadian element to the story. I mean, Argo was very much the perspective through Tony Mendez. It's one prism, his role in that situation, and then because of that being a Hollywood film, it's embellished a little bit. There's things added to make it more dramatic. This was to be focused on providing a complete picture of the hostage crisis, including the Canadian participation, including what was going on at the embassy with the 52 hostages, which was really left out of the story in Argo.
And I think also we wanted to set up the Iranian story a little more carefully and a little bit with a bit more empathy as well. And so there's the Shah story, and there's the Ayatollah story, and the moderates.
Not just scary guys in beards, basically.
Exactly, because we approached it with a certain amount of empathy, I think.
Ken, I wanted you to expand on something that you mentioned in the documentary. You talked about how the CIA plan took what could have been what sounds like a relatively simple idea of having the so-called Canadians be a documentary film crew examining essentially the revolution, and then it became something else. So really it could have been that simple, because that seems like such a natural fit for that mission.
Yeah, I like things simple.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're in a hurry to leave.
And when lives are at stake, sure.
So, we welcomed, of course, it was a Canadian venture, but we certainly welcomed the involvement of the CIA. My own thought is that the 6 basically had to be Canadians.
Yeah.
Then you can give them any identity you want.
Right.
Teachers, agronomists, petroleum engineers, documentary movie makers,
Right.
what have you. But as it is, it worked out fine, but it was elaborate. It was Hollywood at its best.
As it is, it worked out fine, but I mean, I think you suggest in the documentary that they added a needless level of complication to a very dangerous mission. I mean, it makes for an entertaining film with Ben Affleck and a phone ringing and someone has to answer it, but, you know, you would think you would want to pare things down, not build them up.
Yeah, I think that's the Canadian approach.
Yeah.
The movie was great. When Pat and I, my wife, saw it, we both looked at it, Argo, and said, I wish we would have been there.
Right.
Has Ben Affleck seen this one? Our Man in Tehran?
Apparently we did invite him. The premiere's tonight.
The premiere, and we sent him a copy just to see it so that he would know what we had done. He had actually offered to narrate the film. We ended up deciding that it wasn't appropriate to have a narrator in this film. We wanted the people that were on the ground in Tehran to tell the story, and that's what we did, and it's made without a narrator. It would just be a little bit more difficult.
You refused Ben Affleck
It
narrating
wasn't
the
that
film?
we refused Ben Affleck. We just decided not
For
to
the,
use a
no,
narrator.
to do what you thought was right? That's pretty cool. That's pretty Canadian, isn't it, Ken?
It's nice to have the voices of the people who actually took part, and to have someone like Bill, who actually went through this grueling existence, 444 days.
Bill, have you watched the documentary now?
Not yet.
Not yet. So
Not yet. I expect to tonight.
I mean, you seem very. This is someone who was, you know, held for a long time, and you seem very composed and almost at ease in the documentary. But I actually wonder if watching the documentary again will bring kind of certain things to the surface, because this was a very, you know, emotional time for you. I imagine there must still be, you know, scars at some level.
Not really. I've done a lot of things before. I went there, and I've done a lot of things after, so it's just kind of a 2-year assignment that didn't quite work out right. I'm with Ken. Make things a little more simple.
Right.
Ken, can you explain to our audience what risk you were at that time, and did you even realize what risks you were involved in?
Well, during a revolution, justice is unpredictable. So if you're in the middle of a revolution, you need some luck, you need a bit of prudence, and you meet some good colleagues. And that was the case in Tehran. We had superb leadership from Prime Minister Joe Clark. I had some good colleagues in Tehran, good support team in Ottawa, working closely with Bill's group, the CIA in Washington, and the State Department. So all in all, it made a good team. Everybody supporting each other. And as I said earlier, whether it's a movie or real life, I always like a good ending.
But Drew and Larry end the film, I would say, framing you in a heroic way. Do you feel comfortable with that label?
Yes, I feel comfortable as a Canadian who accomplished something. Heroic dimensions is a bit beyond my own imagination.
But
however,
going back to the Canadian qualities again,
But
right?
to what Eli said, you're used to being behind the scenes in your role of work. Like, you don't get credit for your heroism. What have the past couple of years felt like to have all these eyes on you?
well, as touched upon by Larry and Drew, the true involvement of Canada, the depth of the involvement in Canada, the possible consequences weren't very apparent. And in fact, they didn't appear at all in Argo. So I think the documentary is quite forthrightly, in no uncertain terms, spells out the risk that Canada took and very much the commitment of the Prime Minister and down through those of us who made part of the Canadian Embassy group.
You had amazing access. How hard was it to get Prime Minister Joe Clark, for example?
He was actually extremely generous.
Really?
Yeah, and that was one of the fantastic things. I mean, people really who went through this want Canadians to know exactly what happened, and I think that they realize that this is a moment that Canada is proud of in their history, and that story should be out there. So Joe Clark and Ken and Flora McDonald and all these very dignified people that would be exactly Tony Mendes in the States.
I'm not going to spoil it, but there's some wonderful kind of behind the scenes and how actually the opposition, for example, was doing a little bit of political maneuvering while lives are in play here.
Yep.
One thing that was very interesting to me was how even though you have to remember this happened 33, 34 years ago. We're talking about a third of a century. But when people talk about it, it could have been yesterday or maybe last year. It's like indelible memories. And again, if you hear Bill and Ken speak about these things, it's like, it's remarkable how evocative it is. And that made our job very easy.
Right.
Big CBC connection in the film. Can you tell us about it?
Huge CBC, and we're very happy that CBC will eventually be airing the film. They haven't actually told us that yet, but it will happen.
And not to mention, we have two of our journalists in
That's
the movie.
yeah.
Actually, three.
Oh, three.
You've got the back of Adrian Clarkson's head.
Oh, really? Okay, thanks.
Carol Jerome, who is the bureau chief, and of course, wonderful Joe Schlesinger. They're both incredible interviewees in the film, and we're very much on the ground. Carol actually was on the airplane going from Paris to Tehran with Khomeini.
Yeah, amazing.
So it was a real privilege to work with these people.
Yeah, some incredible stories. You guys really have to check out this documentary. All right, who is doing the Maverick panel tonight dedicated to our man in Tehran, hosted by Susan Ormiston?
We're not quite sure. Ken was for sure, but I've heard rumors that maybe, it might be Ken, might be Kemba Bill, it might be Joe Clark.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have a guest.
It's all right.
Do you say we haven't asked?
Yeah, and maybe us. I don't know. We'll see. It opens in theaters on the 20th.
Oh, does it? Oh, fantastic.
So I know that Drew and I are going to be heavily involved in that. It's not as interesting as these guys.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. That Maverick panel is at 6:15 if anyone wants to go to TIFF.net to check it out. We'll be back tomorrow for our last show of CBC Live at TIFF, sadly, but it's going to be an amazing one because it's going to be the best of the festival with some incredible guests like George Stroumboulopoulos, Scott Russell, Kurt Browning. So don't miss it at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on CBC Live. And thanks to our audience. We'll see you then.